Revered Sri Hari Prasad Swamiji, distinguished speakers, distinguished guests present here, and all the members of the audience. First and foremost, I must express my gratitude for having been invited here in this august gathering to speak on a subject which is dear to me, though a bit paradoxical. As a soldier, I don't think peace, we are the people who are meant to be associating with peace. In fact, they say that when soldiers reach somewhere, we disturb the peace. Well, hopefully, the topic I'm trying to dwell upon today will give a different perspective of peace from the point of view of practicality of peace. And I'm not going to be politically correct because as soldiers, we are not expected to be politically correct. Some of you have seen this film, Sam Bahadur, which was recently released. And when you could see what Sam, the way the dialogue happened between Sam and Indira Gandhi, Sam very clearly said, well, you are the master of politics, you be what you are. Let me do the job of a general. So something like that. I'm going to speak, plain speaking, on what is the current context today and what and where the peace is heading and what do we need to do to keep peace. Now, while my previous speaker spoke about individual peace, society, social peace, community peace, yes, all this is true. But when it comes to the world order of peace, we have peaceful living, we have peacekeeping when there is some disturbance, then we have peace negotiations, and then we enforce peace after we restore peace. Now, this is the entire spectrum of peace. So peace by itself doesn't exist in the context of world order, which is always competitive. And the competition in the world order, whether it is economic, political, social, geological, geographical, whichever way, the competition is not going to end. Whether it is healthy, and at what point in time a healthy competition changes to an unhealthy competition or from beyond a true spirit of competition to something what a previous speaker used the word greedy competition, we don't know when that happens. In the realm of peace, as we say in the army, the threat is always imminent and you can't predict. A threat can never be predicted. What can only be predicted is the capacity of your adversary to disturb that peace. And we build our strength based on that, not on the threat, because we have to always prepare for the threat. And just because the Jews were not prepared for the threat, you see what happened. We all know, I'm not going to dwell into all that. I'm sure all of you are well read in the papers of what happened, why it happened. There are different perspectives. So therefore, as a soldier, we're going to talk about the aptness and timeliness of this meeting. I'm not going to be talking in extremist terms when we say that definitely there is peace under disturbance and serious disturbance. And we feel so strongly because we've heard of the outcome of what the Hamas operations happened in Israel. The retaliatory action by Israel on Hamas, these two are going to be defining moments of the world peace order. And if you are going to say that this will end sometime by Hamas being completely annihilated by Israelis and we'll all live in a peaceful world, I think we will be undermining our ability to imagine what could be, in what form this whole event can take shape. And therefore, as we say that the forces that operate in the way Hamas has operated, or many other such organizations that operate, they do not operate only in physical form. If some of you know who are the leaders of Hamas are, you have Yahya Sinwar, who is the mastermind behind the current set of operations. You have Mohammed Deif, who is the head of the Qassam Brigade, which conducted these operations. You have Ismail Heni, who is the chairman of Politburo. And you have Khalid Mishal, is the most influential leader of Hamas, prior to Ismail Hanif. Now these people put together are the ones who are not going to be annihilated. What the Israelis are annihilating right now are the ground soldiers. They just get reborn. And with every person that is killed in this environment, unfortunately what happens is that 4 more are born. In India, there is a mythology of Kali, Ma Kali. For those who are not familiar with it, the Ma Kali had to take shape to be born in India to kill demons, wherein there was a demon on whose neck, Bharkasura, if you cut his neck, every drop of blood would create 4 more demons. And ultimately, Mahakali had to take that shape to start drinking that blood and prevent it from falling on the ground. Now, these are mythological statements. Some of it may be true, but these have larger sense of meaning and understanding in the current day environment. And therefore, what I'm trying to arrive at is that let us not assume that the world is going to be a peaceful place to live in after all this is over, after Israel commits its complete operations. In fact, I would say that those countries where secularism is prevailing, where religion, multifaceted religion is existing, coexisting and peacefully coexisting, they are more threatened than those countries which follow uniform religion. Because disturbing peace in a country which has diverse set of beliefs and non-beliefs is far more easier than disturbing peace in a country which has a uniform set of beliefs. And that's where I place India. We all understand the strength of India. We all understand the strength, the unity of India in its diversity. We have lived with it for as many as 75 years when we celebrate our 75th anniversary. But the same diversity may come under threat if you don't accept the reality of the situation today. And I say this because India is a very important nation to the world today, not because it is the most powerful superpower. We know who that is. We have Christopher sitting representing that country. But the importance of India today in world peace is far more than ever. Because we represent certain values, we represent certain justice, we represent certain systems, and we represent certain mechanisms that helps us retain peace in a diverse environment with different beliefs. Well, there is an interesting book, Just and Unjust Wars, by Michael Walzer. He's a great philosophical person, a great historian. He wrote this book way back in 1977. And that was the time the world was seeing a complete change in the world order after World War II. The Cold War and the kind of things, the countries realigning, new countries born, decolonization, all that was happening. And he mentions about what is a just war. So let me ask you, what is the opposite of peace? What is the antonym of peace? Anyone from the audience would like to attempt? So opposite of peace is violence, opposite of peace is conflict. Anything else? Anybody else? So there's war. Now see, this is where we all come from. Because we think that there are only two sides of a coin. If it is peace, if there is no peace, there is conflict. If there is no peace, there has to be war. Well, as a soldier, that's the second part is what we take care of, not the first part. The first part is incidental for us, what happens. So, what Michael Walzer tries to say here is that wars are going to happen, wars will happen. If you're expecting that the wars in the world have ended with World War II, it's not going to happen. We have seen the number of wars that many countries have fought for good or bad reasons. But in this conference, when you're talking of justice and peace, I think if a war is fought for just reasons, there is good reason to believe, and so this is what exactly Michael Walzer says, that the war shall end in peace, and justifiable and peaceful of justice. And that's where he gives the example of India's nobility and India's ability to discern what is justice and where it needs to intervene. Let's have some case studies from the past. The Indian history is full of such case studies which talks about the essentiality of peace, the necessity to protect the peace. In the mythology, we have a great saint by name Parasurama. I'm sure all of us, or many of you are much more senior to me, we all know who Parasurama is. But what is the context of Parasurama? Parasurama was the son of a Brahmin father and a Kshatriya mother, Renuka. And Brahmin father by name Jamagadiri. Jamagadiri, yeah. And Parashurama, for the benefit of Christopher, is a saint. When you say Kshatriya, Kshatriya is someone who's meant to fight, protect the nation. He is from the martial clan. His father was from the Brahmin clan, from the learned class. But Parashurama, as a saint, had to take up arms to protect the peaceful existence of his community. As a saint, he became the first person who took up his axe and went about killing Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriyas came to disturb his peace, because his father's life was threatened. And he didn't stop. He wanted to teach a lesson to all the Kshatriyas who were unjust. And he only reconciled when he met Sri Rama. Madam, would you like to please relate that story? I can see that she knows that story very well. No, we would like to hear it from you. See, this is not a conference that I'm just going to speak and speak. I think the participation of audience is more important for us to understand where we are headed. And that's where the whole, debate and the conference becomes interesting. So he had to meet Sri Rama to understand that the avatar of Vishnu himself was there. He himself is considered as the avatar of Vishnu. And then he realized that Sri Rama was here to bring peace back into India, into the Indian subcontinent. And he retreated back, reconciled into his saintly abode. So comes the context of Sri Rama. Sri Rama, we all know what all he did in order to be just in his approach as a prince, as a king, even to the extent of sacrificing the kingdom for 14 years, just to show what is justice, just to show what he stands for. And what he did as Ashwamedh Yajna was nothing but a way of peacefully sending diplomatic missions across the nation on a horseback to say that if you are accepting our suzerainty, or whatever word you want to use it, you can join Bharata as a nation and live, we can all live in peaceful coexistence. There was no war. His horse with the huge army didn't have to fight a single war. That was the message of peace he spread. And we had Ram Rajya. So while these are all, some people say, mythological underpinnings, but I think all of us have very strong beliefs that these are within the realms of truth and reality. So if that be the case, what happened thereafter? India moved on, and we had another great period of peaceful coexistence under the rule of Ashoka, who ruled from Magadha, Bihar, the land of prosperity. He created the first republic in the world, when the world was still reeling to understand what is the meaning of republic. And then, one fine day, after the Kalinga War, Ashoka decided to embrace Buddhism. It is under the reign of Ashoka that thereafter Buddhism spread to the rest of India. Otherwise, Buddhism was existing in some parts only. The whole of North India was practically engulfed by Buddhism. It is surprising that it's not existing anymore in that form. And because Ashoka was such a great emperor, because he was such a great king, because he had a powerful army, and because he had almost completely, I would say, taken the entire subcontinent under his empire, there was no threat. And hence, Buddhism prevailed. Buddhism spread. To the extent that Buddha was accepted as possibly another reincarnation of Mahavishnu. Am I right? Many accept it, some of us don't. But that has been accepted. And then there was intermingling of Buddhism and Hinduism to a great extent. But Buddhism is a religion which talks of only peaceful coexistence. It is not prepared to accept that there can be disturbance to peace. And that resulted in the Pala Empire falling in the hands of invaders. Because the Pala Empire, under Pala Empire, this is 8th century BC, when the Pala Empire was again an empire which promoted Buddhism and the Buddhistic ideology, the value systems, etc. But because of those beliefs, they were not adequately strong and prepared to so-called the Han invaders and also the Islamic invaders. And that is where India lost out. That changed the entire landscape of Indian subcontinent. And India is what India is today, after having seen a series of different types of rulers that India went through. And that is when Hinduism revived. Because if you see Hinduism, all gods in Hinduism preach you peace. They talk about harmony, internal harmony. All of us are aware of this. We have our Swami, who's constantly preaching us, and we are here all to pray for peace. But in Hindu gods, if you see, I don't think there's an exception where a god is not holding an arm. Is there anyone in the crowd who can tell me one Hindu god in whose hand there is no weapon? See, what does this mean? It means peace is not absolute. Peace has to be protected. Peace has to be kept. Peace has to be retained, and if required, by force. Well, the Indian civilization moved on, the medieval period moved on, and then was born Sikhism. Again, another Guru Nanak, and again a peaceful religion. One of the most revered religion I think Indian subcontinent has seen. The preachings of Guru Nanak is outstanding. We've all seen what is Golden Temple. You go there, you feel you are in heaven. But that same religion which taught peace had to become militant. When Guru Gobind Singh and repeatedly many gurus were born who had to fight the tyranny of the invaders, the tyranny of the opponents, the tyranny of the suppressors, the same religion became the most militant religion. But for what? Only for self-defense. That religion picked up arms not to invade another nation. It didn't pick up arms to subjugate another nation or another state. It picked up arms to defend its people from the tyranny of the oppressors. India moved on. Buddhism declined. Sikhism prevailed. Hinduism prevailed. New religions came in from outside. They enforced their beliefs in this nation. Many of us accepted those. And today we are a multipolar country. A more recent example is Tibet. So Hinduism, Buddhism moved to Tibet, to places where there was relative threat to peace. Why? Because the roof of the world, Tibet is known as the roof of the world. I am sure many of us know this. It's a plateau, right on top of the Himalayas at 14,000, 15,000 feet, 16,000 feet. Buddhism survived there for quite a few years because the geography of Buddhism prevented invaders from coming. It's only as late as the 1940s, late 40s and early 50s, that the Chinese, post the Chinese Revolution, when the communist government was established there, that they decided to exercise their suzerainty over Tibet. The Tibetan population resisted it to a great extent, but ultimately they had to give in to the force of the Chinese invasion. And to retain peace, they had to give up their independence. And at that time, sad to say, the world powers did not come to the aid of this peaceful nation. It's a fact, and we all need to accept it. Because unless we accept the mistakes we have done in the past to keep our self-interest alive, we will never learn. And those nations which we did not support this peaceful nation later started talking of Buddhism as a peace. But what happened when the peace was to be kept there? People signed accords with a more powerful nation. As I said, I'm not going to be politically correct, because I don't believe in being politically correct. Well, so where are we now? We are at a stage where if you allow the hydra of West Asia to grow, because hydras take different shapes, they multiply in numbers, where in which form it will manifest, we don't know. Ideally, it tends to manifest at a place where the environment is most conducive for it. And what is that environment which is most conducive for it? Where there is internal dissensions. And why do these internal dissensions happen? Because there are differences. There are differences in sociological alignments. There are differences in justice and peace. There are differences in ideology and beliefs. And there are differences in economic orders. So whenever you find that there are such inequalities, the first speaker spoke about equality, it's a real cauldron for the hydra to grow and flourish. And that is where I'm trying to arrive at what we need to do as a nation. I'm going to show you a little clip before I tell you where India comes from. This clip is about India's 1971 war. Christopher has already seen this clip. I'm sure you'll not mind seeing it again if you don't mind, Christopher. This little video is part of the sub-construct of this today's conference, because I see that of all the subtitles that has been mentioned, one of it is about the taking peace narrative to the society through storytelling, through theatre, through different forms of presentations of creativity. I will talk about this a little later, after I kind of give you a few more perspectives of what this war is all about. The war in 1971, India-Pak war in 1971, is no small war. It is a war which the world must study, as did Michael Walzer. And why should the world study this war? What is the takeaway from this war? Let's understand this. It was a war to which India was almost forced into and invited by a community, a nation, to help them out. That is the justification for the war, and is their true justification. When the East Pakistan was suffering under the tyrannical rule of its barbaric own government, where lakhs of people had been murdered, raped, plundered, killed and whatnot, India was suffering with 10 million plus refugees. And when the world did not come to the aid of India, India had to take its own step. And India went into this nation. We invaded East Pakistan in the right earnest, but at the invitation of the Bangladeshi people. And in 13 days flat, the Indian army went and completely subjugated the Pakistan army in East Pakistan in a 13-day war, unheard of in history. On such a huge nation, which is interspersed with riverine terrain, fields, most difficult for the tanks to move and everything. And after Dhaka fell, India did not stay there. It could have easily, because the whole of East Pakistan was under the full control of Indian Army and Air Force and Navy. You could have just stayed on. We didn't colonize Bangladesh. We didn't annex Bangladesh. We didn't loot its people. We came back like good neighbors. And what we left behind there is a democracy, is a flourishing democracy. And a state that flourished to become what is Bangladesh today. Where do you get such example in modern history of wars? Post World War II, is there anyone who can tell me one war which world has fought after World War II which can be as just as this? Nowhere. The Indian Armed Forces treated the Pakistani soldiers, so-called enemy, with honor and dignity. 93,000 Pakistani soldiers were given honorable surrender and saved from the lynching hands of Mukti Bahini and given back, repatriated back to Pakistan, with whom it was fighting its own war honorably, following the tenets of peacekeeping, the United Nations peace on dealing with prisoner of wars. The India faced pressure from United States and the Western world and still went on with the war. That's why Indira Gandhi is known as an Iron Lady. And I think the whole nation agrees with it. Mukti Bahini's support to the Indian Army was critical. It just showed that the Bangladeshi population was with us. And the interesting part about this war from Indian Army is that the armed forces of India comprises of multi-religious, multi-social and multi-ethnic background. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the Chief of Army Staff at that time was General Manekshaw, who was a Parsi. Lieutenant General J.F.R. Jacob, as Swamiji mentioned this morning, who was the Chief of Staff of Eastern Army of India, was a Jew. Air Marshal Latif was a Muslim. I can go on. You will find the Indian top hierarchy in the military as well as in the soldiers. Complete ethnic blend of India. And we fight as a nation together. When Indian Army fights, we don't see what thread I wear here or what thread I wear here. I see which unit I come from and what I'm fighting for. That is the strength of India. And it is this strength that we have to retain. And my next course of my discussion is going to be on how do we do this. And what is the need to do this and how do we do this. Well, I'm not sure. Please stop me if I'm running out of time. I'll be most happy to stop.
5 minutes?
Yeah. Whenever you stop, ask me to stop because I've got a long page to go. Well, the most interesting part of this war is India as a secular nation goes and saves a nation which is pure Islamic. So much is the depth of India's understanding of world peace, of friendly neighborhood. And that is why my compulsive suggestion, the need for world to study India's way of living, India's so-called nobility. And wars can never be noble, but this war for a change can be stated as a noble war, a just war. Such examples are rare to come by. I will not name Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. There are many such wars. You can always draw comparisons, come to our own conclusion. But in order to do what I am trying to say, what I am trying to do, why the Indian example needs to be taken to the world, now we all understand where it comes from. And I think this ideology of India is not going to change because it is there in our hearts and minds. It doesn't come because we learn it from the books. It comes because through generations it is passed down to us. As a soldier, when we say that Indian soldier is a messiah of peace and not a warmonger, I mean it. Manik Shah could have become a dictator after this war. You all saw the movie Sam Bahadur. What did he say? He said, my duty is soldiering. Indira Gandhi was afraid what is going to happen. Because that was the larger than life figure that Manik Shah had reached. Although its neighbors were being ruled by dictators, but an Indian soldier never thought of that, he never thinks of that. Because Indian soldier, as we teach in our academies, is essentially a messiah of peace. I have myself participated in peacekeeping operations, the United Nations peacekeeping missions, peace enforcement missions. Fortunately, both these missions I was together in United Nations for peacekeeping mission in Sierra Leone. And my experience there tells me that this is what most of the countries in the world also believe in. As a military observer, in the first half of the mission, before the peace enforcement came in, we had to go around in Sierra Leone, where there was a civil war between the local population and the government. There was maiming of children, murder of people. It was a civil war which was you can't imagine what kind of brutality that war nation suffered. And we had to go through all that as a military observer, believing that that blue beret will help us from a maverick soldier. So we used to wear that blue beret, take a car early morning at 7 o'clock, go around Sierra Leone, talking to the so-called rebel forces, trying to keep peace, negotiate, mediate, and tell them, listen, peace will happen. Let's wait for the, government-to-government talks to happen in ABCD, etc. To prevent any kind of spark of disturbance and subdue it. That was our job as military observer. And we had to go into the interiors. And the experience that I had there, I'm really astonished, or I would say happy also, being a proud Indian, that they were all very happy to talk to any team which had an Indian in that. What does it say? It's because the Indians who were living in Sierra Leone during the midst of the war, while majority of the other nation's citizens had to vacate, the Indian Marwadis, the Indian Gujjus continued staying there. They were never harmed by the people from Sierra Leone. Because we don't believe in disturbing somebody else's peace. Then came the peace enforcement part of it, because something happened and the UN had to intervene under a different chapter 7 and bring in peace enforcement, so we became part of that. And we have gone through that as well. So India participates in large number of peacekeeping and peace enforcement missions in the world over. And we take pride in participating in this, even though our own borders are always under threat, even though India can little afford to have its armed forces away. Because now we are not facing one side threat, we are facing what is called the two-front threat, which is very difficult to handle. Yet, India does not abstain from its responsibility to subscribe to world peace. Well, so much about India and so much about why again the Indian model needs to be replicated world over. And it is that attempt that we are trying to do as NCC Udan. NCC Udan is a small organization, which is an NGO, which is attempting to develop the patriotism and the so-called love for the state amongst its citizens, especially the youth, through storytelling, through these forms of drama, through theatre, through street plays, through shadow plays. So we want to take different forms and tell the Indian youth, who are our target, as to what is the ideology of India, what is the goodness of India. And when you have to take up arms, what should be the reason for taking up arms? And we do take up, how to be just thereafter. We want the Indian population to understand the greatness of India, which unfortunately today India's youth is not aware of. And I'm telling you this because I've interacted with a large number of youth. I was ADG NCC in Bihar and Jharkhand. I was in NCC as a colonel in Trivandrum. Today's youth is not aware of the greatness of India. And if they are made aware, they feel proud. When they feel proud, they decide to be together. And why is it important? It's important, again, what the first point I said, that the disturbance to peace happens where there are diverse opinions and thoughts. While that diversity will continue. Somebody said Kerala is a place where, yeah, I think Christopher said that Kerala has been there, Trivandrum. It's a state where there is the largest form of religious harmony. I come from Kerala, by the way, and I've experienced it. While that is all fine, but there is also a similar threat that is happening in a similar environment, a much bigger threat that can happen. So how do you bind, how do you prevent the impact, the adverse impact of this most threatened partisan, or I would say polarization of the world that's happening in West Asia, to impact India? The way to do that is try and bind our people, the youth especially, in one thread, one single thread of pride for India. You want to call it nationalism, you want to call it patriotism, you want to call it pride for the state. Let it be pride for Tamil Nadu. But they should take pride in something bigger than something that is divisive. If that happens, then in the simple mathematics, the bigger force will subdue the smaller force. And that is our attempt, through this, to reach out to the youth, exactly the narrative that this conference is expecting us to do, to tell them to be part of India, to take pride in India, to be following India's ideology, to become an Indian. It doesn't matter which sector, which sect, which community, which faith you come from. Feel like an Indian. And if India is safe, if India is peaceful, let me tell you, gentlemen, there's a role model for the world to be peaceful. I rest my case here. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.